Hello, you're listening to Over the Oxer podcast with Tracy Cole for all things to do with the mind for equestrians. So I'm delighted this week to welcome Marcello Costante, who is an entrepreneur, a real estate investor, a community builder, and he hosts high-impact networking events to connect ambitious minds. But the reason that I'm really interested in chatting to Marcello is that he is also an 800-meter runner, and he might even tell us something about being a metal singer. So lots and lots of points of interest. So big warm welcome, Marcello.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Now, I know you must be a really busy person with that kind of CV. So what does sport give you? Why sport and why 800 meters?
I think sport in general gives me almost everything that I need to face the hardship of running a business. It's not always easy. Everybody on Instagram and social media always project their best version of themselves. But the reality is that there is a lot to learn, resilience, especially from sports discipline. I wouldn't have this, or it would be much harder for me to develop this kind of discipline and resilience without my background in sports. And so, yeah, I'm really grateful for this experience because it comes from my family. My dad is a professional coach, international athlete. My stepmom was in the national team multiple times, I think 10 times. When I was a kid, I traveled across Europe with them. And I got exposed to the sport of athletics since I was probably 5 or 6 or something like that. And funny enough, I started running, doing athletics when I was probably around 13, but I had a bad experience with a little bit of smoking and stuff like that. So I dropped off and I started to be pretty much a sedentary person for the next probably 10, 12 years, something like that. And then funny enough, you mentioned the singing, the metal. And I was studying with one of the best coaches in Italy, actually, local coaches. And he knew my family and he came from sports. And he told me, well, you know what? Running would really help you with, lung capacity and stuff like that, would help you sing better. And I was like, huh, interesting. I could do that. And he said, you have a father who does that for a living. So why don't you take advantage of that? And so I went to my dad, I was probably 25, said, okay, I want you to help me go to the Olympics. And of course it didn't happen. And this is very important because I think that's where I started to make the first mistakes, because I was exposed to a reality where the people I was training with were either professionals or semi-professionals. And they were at a much higher level, and it takes time to get there. And it's not something that happens overnight, especially if you're starting that late, like myself, 25 years. And so when I started to do that, I was always trying to prove myself, to prove that I was good, especially to my dad, and that I was like deserving of being in that group. And so because of that, I always pushed the limits and I always got injured. And so for the first 2 or 3 years, I was on and off multiple times. So there was no consistency, no discipline, not much resilience. The things that we talked about in the past, they came later, actually way later, because then I moved to Valencia. I was in Italy before, moved to Valencia, Spain. And after again, trying and failing, I was like, why am I doing this? This is not working. I need to start from the basics and not from the results, because I was focused on the results. And this is exactly what I always talk about, which is basically I started from 1 minute of running last year, a little over 1 year ago. And it's crazy because I didn't even want to do the 800s. I thought it was too late for me in life to do that. And that 1 minute became 2, and then 4 and 5 and 6. And eventually it became a structured training. And finally, I realized I was way faster than I was expecting at my age, because I'm 39. I'm not a kid anymore, Especially sprinting is something that kind of fades off when you get older. And despite that, kind of fast, I'm not a professional sprinter, but way faster than I would expect. And so I was like, maybe I can go back to the 800 meters. And the funny thing is that because I started so small, I was able to get to the point where basically I built the habit before it became hard. And because of that, I was able to stick to it for the first time in my life for a full year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fabulous. That's amazing. It's amazing. You're a late starter. But
Mm, you can say that, yeah.
so
Definitely.
why the 800 meters? Because from what I know, the little bits that I know about running, it's middle distance. So
Yes.
you're not doing the longer distance, but you're
Mhm.
doing an incredibly tactical race. There's a
Yeah.
lot of mindset in there, isn't there?
Yeah.
Because for people who don't know and don't watch athletics or anything like that, you don't start in the lanes, do you? You start
Yeah, this you start yeah,
down
the
that
start is in the
curve.
lanes.
You start in that curve, don't
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so it's basically the first 100 meters. We stay in our lane, but starting from the band, basically,
you? Yeah,
from the beginning of the band. And then after the first 100 meters, which is pretty much where the band ends, you start to join everyone in lane one. So
yeah,
everyone gets together, basically.
yeah. And I suppose you have to think about, are you going to run from the front and lead, which nobody really wants to do? Are you going to stay at the back? Are you going to stay in the middle?
Yeah.
Of course, if you need to overtake, you've got to run greater distance because you're going
Yeah.
into the second lane. It's incredibly hard on the brain, isn't it? As well as the legs, I presume.
It is. Yeah, it's really hard when you're racing. But I would say like even Usain Bolt who did sprinting, pure sprinting, 100 and 200 meters, what he said is really true, holds true. I would say for any distance, is that the real hard part is the training. The race is the fun day. You know, it's like that's not where you struggle a bit with the 800 meters and 400 meters as well. Say they're the toughest races. But it's true what you said, like the tactical part of it very much depends on even like who you are as a race as an athlete. Because
Yeah,
for example, right now I'm coming from sprinting. I'm actually rebuilding the distance. So for example, for me right now, if I were to start, like if I were to race tomorrow, I say if I were to, because usually racing season starts towards the end of maybe April, early May, something like that.
yeah,
So I'm still in the winter preparation, let's say. But if I were to race tomorrow, I would probably have, it would be smarter for me to start pretty fast and trying to hold on as much as possible.
yeah,
Whereas someone who's coming from longer distances, for example, who has a better aerobic base, they would probably want to do the opposite, start kind of like pace themselves in the
yeah.
beginning and then trying to kick it at the end, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's I suppose what I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of the childhood people that I knew, people who were running in my childhood that I would watch on television, like Sebastian Coe and Steve
Yeah.
Ovett,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
from many, many decades ago. But they would kick, wouldn't they, in the last 200
Yeah.
meters or something like that. Yeah, yeah. But a really tough race. So did you
Yeah.
always want to do the 800 meters, or did it choose you?
I think it chose me because when I started, when I went to my dad's, he made me an Olympic athlete. Uh, yeah, what happened was that I thought the 400 meters in the beginning because I knew I was not the fastest sprinter, but I also knew I was not the greatest long distance runner. So to me, it seemed like the 400 was the better fit for me. But as I started training and to actually get better on everything, let's say, I realized together with my dad that actually 800 meters is probably my ideal distance because I'm fast enough to do something like that, but not as fast as someone who runs the 400. And I can definitely work on my aerobic, capacity, and that would help sustain the whole race, the whole 800-meter race.
Yeah, yeah. So how did you get then from doing metal singing and
Yeah,
running to where you are now? What's your journey been like?
crazy.
Yeah.
Definitely a roller coaster. I actually left the band before I moved to Spain, like a couple of years before, because I became kind of jaded with, and also, yeah, disillusioned with the whole industry. Because basically, we had a label, but as soon as we started to work with them, again, this goes back to, the result oriented
Mm,
dangers, let's say, in what we do. Because when we started to work with them, they were very much focused on selling more
yeah,
because that's
yeah.
what they're interested in. And for us, it was never that. But then we got a little distracted by that. And so we started working with them where we had situations where, not always, but some concerts we had, like some shows we had 500 people in front of us. It was great. It was like amazing. And eventually working with them, we ended up playing with, our parents maybe, or our best friends as our audience. And so we actually went back instead of going forward. And so after that, they started to ask us more and more money. And I was like, no, that's it. It doesn't make sense. And and so from there, I after a couple of years, I moved to Valencia and I tried to go back to singing, but I really was much more focused on the business. And I tried actually to be a running coach because to me
Mm,
it made sense, coming from that kind of background. But I realized I didn't want to be a running coach, and I had some other coaches who I was doing fine with social media. It was during COVID, so it was working pretty well. I had some other coaches who approached me and said, "Can you teach us?" Can teach me, actually. It was just one. And I said, yes, why not? And I realized I could make more money, have more fun. And so I started to do that, help other coaches and consultants. And then from there, yeah, I became a business consultant basically. But I think a combination of things, both external and internal. I started, like, at some point I was doing fine, had a six-figure business running, working a couple of hours a day. And then those 2, 3 hours became 4, 5, 10 weekends, 12, 15 hours every day, to the point where I had a son a year and a half ago. And I said, this doesn't make any sense. We're in the same house and I can't see my son and my wife. And so I realized that I was staying busy to look like I was doing something. But in reality, I was wasting a lot of energy and a lot of time. I was probably on the verge of burnout and definitely not productive for 15 hours a day. And so I stepped back and said, this doesn't make sense. This is not the life I want to live. This is not making me happy. This is not making me richer or anything.
yeah,
And so it's totally a waste of my time and my energy and my health. And so I stepped back and I actually went back to running. And from there, I became more disciplined. I realized I wanted to work with real estate. I started to learn that. I started to work with investors, which is probably, yeah, the main part of my business right now. And yeah, I'm still consulting one business, honestly, just one. I'm not locking doors. Like, if someone, I know this is someone I can help, I'll do it. But I realized in this process, the real change for me was moving away from the goals and focusing on something that I was happy to do, that would bring me joy, that would make me feel, helpful to others, really. Because I've always had this motivation of helping others. But then what happened is that money corrupted me, in a sense, corrupted that motivation, the pure motivation to help others, and turned me into someone who would, I've always believed in honesty, so I never lied to people. But I would probably sometimes propose my service to someone who might or might not benefit from it, but I was not 100% sure. Whereas now I only propose my services when I know 100% I'm gonna be of service. And that changed everything. Because once I made that switch, I started to make more money. I started to find more free time. I started to bring the stress down.
yeah,
And yeah, that was and this applies. It's like a loop, in the sense that you learn something from sports that goes back to business and your life, and then it goes back to sports again. So it's
yeah,
like, it's a cycle. It
yeah.
keeps, yeah,
And you touched on certain things that I think are really interesting. You talked a little bit within that about results,
yeah,
and you talked a little bit about goals. And I know
yeah,
now that's one of your things that you've really, really pushed, that, there are so many paradoxes about how we're taught to set goals and
yeah.
really, really strive for goals. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to people who are high performers, so whether it's in business or in sports, usually they are taught to set plans, to create these plans, and sometimes maybe look at the big goals that you have, break them down into smaller results or goals or whatever, and then try to achieve one at a time as if it's a ladder, right? A very linear thing. The problem with that approach is that it only works for so long. Usually, the first step, if you have something like this, is something that triggers people, especially in this kind of like the high performance. When I tell them, you know what, goals are not the best way to direct to get results, basically to achieve those goals. If you focus on the goals, this is a paradox, right? And they usually get triggered because they're like, they think this is the best way, right? I'm
Yeah.
motivated. I have a drive, and if I go for these goals, they're going to happen. And it's important to note that when I say that that is not the best way, we are talking about some sort of greatness in our life. So we're not talking something, we're talking about extraordinary results, not the typical thing. Like, let's say you have a business and you want to just like, let's say your industry is growing 15% a year and you just want to match that with your business and keep growing 15% a year. That works perfectly with result driven approach and goals and all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But if you want to be like, the thought leader, sorry, the thought leader in your industry, or if you want to be the trailblazer or something like that, probably that kind of approach is not going to work very well long term. The better approach that I usually propose and that I've seen that has revolutionized my life, the way I feel, and also the way things are happening, the opportunities that I'm seeing and noticing that I cannot see before. The better approach is to basically focus on what you feel inspired to do, what you feel is connected to your values, what you feel is the now, basically. So, for example, when it comes to sports, until fairly recently, I was still thinking, okay, I want to run this time for the 800 meters. So, how do I do that? Oh, I need to work on this and this and this, and it's going to happen. It's not, because when I do that, I shift the focus from how I feel today, where I am right now, and acknowledge that and accept that, to trying to achieve something that might be out of reach for now. And when I shift back to, for example, yesterday I went for a session that's kind of extreme. It's very intense, especially on the tendons. And I have my tendons are a little inflamed right now because I had a fever that brought it up. So yesterday, if I were focused on the results, I would have had to finish that training, because if I don't do it, otherwise, it's
Yeah.
gonna, you gotta finish or else, because,
Yeah. Yeah.
I got this goal. But now I don't. I'm like, no, I want to feel healthy, because if I have an injury tomorrow and it takes me 3 months to recover from that injury, it's not a great deal for my training. My goal is gonna be actually postponed and made it much harder to achieve.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's why when you shift to the things that make that goal a natural consequence and you stop thinking about the goal still happens and it's more likely to happen. It's just you have a better time. You are not under that much pressure of achieving something today. The only thing you want to, well, I wouldn't say it's achieving, but it's like the only thing that you are focused on is feeling good
Hmm.
with what you're doing. And it doesn't mean that you chill and don't push yourself. It's not that, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pushing yourself can feel good some days when you're
Hmm.
healthy and when you have that capacity. But sometimes, like yesterday for me, it's also important to acknowledge that today is not the day, right?
Yeah.
Today is the day
Yeah.
when I pull back a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's really important because, equestrians, they've got themselves to think about and their own physicality and their
Yeah.
mentality and their emotional balance, but they've got this semi-wild animal as well to
Yeah.
think about.
Absolutely.
So sometimes it can be a frustrating sport because one of you isn't in perfect health and so people get very frustrated that they're not going to achieve their goals in the time frame, or they can't ride for a week, or they can't ride for 6 months. And it becomes such a mental game. But if you could, like you say, have that goal in the back of your mind, maybe. it's not something you concentrate on. It's something you know about, but you don't focus on it. You don't place all your attention on it. You focus on the here and now, and you do what you can that's worthwhile, but within your physical or emotional or mental limits, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think this is part of the paradox is that actually when you completely forget, I would say, not just put in the back of your mind, but completely forget about the goal, you open up so many opportunities and possibilities that most of the times people get surprised how far they go. And it stretches way beyond their original goals
Mm.
or what they thought it was possible. Like my example, for example, it's like a year ago, if you told me, well, maybe a little over a year ago, 2 years ago, if you told me I was gonna be able to like one of my let's say goals now I'm gonna contradict myself, but like I would like to go to the world what's it called like Masters World Championship, which is basically the old guys like me pretending we're still doing something important worldwide. But it's like something for fun, you know. I don't get paid for that. I don't get sponsorships or anything if I become even if I achieve to becoming like the world champion in that
Yeah.
case. It's just like a fun thing to look forward to. But it's not my goal in the traditional sense. It's not like, oh, to get there, I need to run this fast. Otherwise, I'm not good enough or whatever.
Mm.
Because there's also that, you know. And when you remove that kind of goal and you're like, you know, I focus on the right things. Again, if I went back 2 years ago and someone told me you're going to be able to think about that, maybe it's going to be a possibility for you.
Mm.
I would have said, I don't think so. Like,
Yeah.
it's too fast for me, right? And now I know potential, I have the potential speed. So the speed is there, but I don't have the endurance yet. So if
Yeah.
I work on the endurance, it's not 100% impossible. And again, I'm not going to work on the endurance thinking I need to run this fast for this long. I'm going to work on it like, where am I today? How do I feel today? Can I push a little bit today, or should I hold back a little bit today? It's always about the today, the moment, which opens up a lot of opportunities and possibilities. And one of the reasons why I'm here is actually that I allowed myself to experiment with things that are not directly connected to running.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, I was working on isometrics for my tendon problems because I have weak tendons at the moment. I'm working on it, but it's a long journey with tendons. Anyone who's had a tendonitis will know that it's not something that
Yeah.
heals overnight.
Yeah.
And so, especially if you run on it,
Yeah.
uh, yeah. And so with this, I realized that the kind of work that I'm doing to strengthen my tendons is probably part of what allowed me to run faster than I thought I could.
Yeah.
And so it would have never happened if I only focused on doing the athletics typical stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think, equestrians are exactly the same. We focus on riding. That's what we do all the time. And
Yeah,
it's the minority of riders who do another sport or they do something to keep their fitness going in a different way to riding. But
yeah,
they're the ones that have all the benefits, I think.
yeah,
So I'm curious about this goal setting and this non-goal setting.
yeah.
Do you set a goal and then forget it, or do you not set goals at all?
No, I don't do that anymore. Again, what I said in the beginning, goals and being have the result in your mind really works pretty well when something that's within reach. So,
Yeah,
for example, I just did a test that tells me that I can run 2:18 in the 800 meters. So if I try to push it a little bit and do 2:15, for example, right now, because
yeah,
it's,
yeah,
it's as slow as like it's slow enough for 3 seconds to not be that much. If we were talking about 1:45, 3 seconds will be a lot more.
yeah,
But in
yeah,
this case, I'm still slow. I'm still early in the preparation. So I can do that. I can say, okay, in my sessions when I'm feeling good, I'm gonna run like 2:15 runner
yeah, yeah,
and try to push the limit a little bit. But if I were to set a goal like, I don't know, for example, let's take the Masters World Championship. Let's say that to win that, I need to like last year it was won with 1:59. So let's say I want to be safe and prepare with 157 in mind. We're not just pushing the limits here. We're like running like a pro almost. Not like a
Yeah.
pro, but like a semi-pro
Yeah. Yeah.
some days.
Yeah.
And so that's not where I am right now. It's not acknowledging where I am right now. And that goal becomes a distraction and it creates deceptions. And it makes me think that I'm putting all my effort into it, so it's going to
Hmm.
happen. But I'm completely ignoring all the risks that are associated with that because the risk of injury will be through the roof, right?
Yeah.
And it's a little bit like investing, right? You can invest in like crazy crypto
Yeah. Yeah.
meme coins and all that. And sure, if you win big. But the reality is that the vast majority of people lose everything with that. And actually, I've had that experience in the past, by the way. So I know what I'm talking about with that. I was within the 99% that lost everything. And so again, it looks like your goal is to make more money,
Hmm.
and it is in your mind, but the reality is that you're completely ignoring all the red flags, maybe of investing. I never invested in a meme coin, but if you do, like, you're probably ignoring all the things that you should be taking a look at
Yeah.
that would stop you from doing that. Or maybe you would just invest, I don't know, very small amounts. And with running or sports, it's the same thing. You're investing all of your energy on this very goal, and now you're sacrificing your health, mental also, because when you
Mhm.
push to the limits, I had this experience that I saw this woman, this girl that was preparing for 400 meters, and I think she was doing a test or something like that. I don't know exactly. I didn't talk to her about it. But I saw that she had a stopwatch in her hand, and she shoved it against the floor, the ground,
Yeah.
And I said to myself, like, that's not good. That's not the right way to do it. And probably when this happens is because, well, first off, we're in winter. Like I said before, my times are very slow right now, and I'm okay with that. It's part of the process. It's gonna get much better in summer, but right now we're preparing. And so when I saw her, I thought, how is it possible that someone gets so angry
Yeah.
for something that's not supposed to happen now? Because if she was fast now, she'd be slow during race season. So again, like, the
Okay.
goal and the expectations that you have now are completely off because you're now forgetting about the important stuff, which is getting in good shape by the time you have to compete, not now. And so you have this goal that's beyond reality. You're not
Mm.
acknowledging where you are right now in the journey. You become frustrated because of that. So again, it's not just the health of your body, but it's also your mind that's suffering there. And it creates a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, and it's just not necessary. You can live without a goal. If you let go of the goal and focus on the things that you love to do when you're riding, for example,
Mm.
like, I'm pretty sure that, like, there's no logic reason for me to run the 800 meters. There's no logic reason for, I mean, a little bit we can justify logically, of course, but probably someone who likes to ride, it's not because they have some logical reason to justify that. It's just they like it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
no, when you like to do something, when you want to do something,
Hmm.
there's no justification. You just want and like to do it. And
Yeah.
so if you connect to those feelings that makes you want to do it more, probably you're gonna let go of all the stress associated
Yeah.
with the goal. You're gonna do more of it. You're gonna be more focused on just getting better at producing those feelings in a sense. And when you do that, you also get better at writing, at the skills that will make the goal possible without having the goal. So you
Yeah.
probably achieve more than what you think. There's this saying that people underestimate no overestimate what they can achieve in 1 year and underestimate what they can achieve in 10 years.
Right. Yeah. 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 I like that. That's great. So would you say it's about living more in the now than
Yeah,
living in the future? Would you say that
absolutely.
that
Absolutely.
encapsulates some of the ideas?
Yeah. Also, the past is a problem sometimes because it depends on the person. And if you had a lot of stress with mistakes that you've done in the past, that you made in the past,
Yeah.
you're gonna look back and think, oh, if I could go back and change that.
Yeah.
Oh, next time I'm not gonna make that same mistake. And sometimes you do make the same mistake
Yeah.
regardless.
Yeah, and I think as well, we never know what's around the corner. With horses, with riders, with your own fitness, with your financial circumstances or anything like that. So
Yeah,
if you could do as you suggest and enjoy yourself. And,
yeah,
like you said, contemplate on where am I today? Where am I today in my physicality, mentality, emotionality? What can I do? And
yeah,
stretch myself. What can I do if I'm
yeah,
ready to stretch and I'm able to stretch myself? But I love the way that it's like your goal sneaks up on you anyway. You
yeah,
hit it
yeah,
anyway.
yeah, yeah. With sports, with business, money making. Because if you think about it, like when it comes to sports, for example, in athletics, it's all about the clock. It's a
Yeah.
time. It's there's a lot of math, to be honest. I remember when I went to there was a big meeting in the mountains, high altitude training, and it was my first time there. And I was in the room with other athletes. Some of them I knew, some of them were new acquaintances, and they were not new to athletics like I was. And they kept talking about numbers like 315 and that guy does 225. And I was like
Yeah. Yeah.
overwhelmed with this. And I went to my dad and said, you didn't tell me this was a math convention. It's like, what's going on here? It's
Yeah.
like, so the numbers are the things that it's easy to measure them. And so when you start measuring them, the goal becomes pretty natural. So it does sneak
Mm.
up on you. And I think that that also the money, when I said the money corrupted my intentions in a sense, it was not because I wanted to make more money necessarily. Yeah, sure, we all do. But the reason was that again, it took the focus away from what's really important, makes me feel good about doing business, and it put it on the things that are not really something that you can touch and feel and experience because
Hmm.
money is just a transactional thing. It's hardly ever more than that. It's you have more money so you can do more of the things that you love. Otherwise, why would you want to have more money?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know that is the paradox, isn't it? And there's so many unhappy millionaires and
Oh yeah,
billionaires as well.
yeah, yeah. I mean, like right now, it's we have this case of people doing drugs just to stay to be able to stay on that wheel, and you're
Yeah,
like, why are you doing that? You have all the money in the world, almost literally.
yeah.
And you could do whatever you like to feel good and experience life and maybe help others. And
Mm,
yet you're so focused on making even more money.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think, you were talking about the numbers, and
Yeah.
obviously it's all times with the runners, and it's similar to competitive riders because it could be a time thing with the show
Yeah.
jumpers. It could also be they get percentage scores in dressage, so
Mhm.
it's the percentage, and the
Yeah.
percentage is to a decimal place as well. So you
Right.
can get like 66.5% and you want 66.8%, and it becomes, like you say, such an obsession
Yeah.
that you lose focus on what you enjoy and the
Yeah.
reason why you do it, because most of the people who listen to this podcast are not professional riders. They don't do it for a living. People who do it professionally have other stresses because it is their job, it's their livelihood, but they can relax into it being something they enjoy and something that I love. It's almost like a backdoor way to get your goals. Did your dad teach you that, or is that something that you've learned yourself?
I think he tried, but I think it's one of those things that hopefully what we're talking about here helps someone gets closer to that. But it's one of those things that you have to experience yourself, I think.
Yeah.
It's like, and you see that when we talk again about, you said some of the audience is not professionals, but usually professionals, that's one of the main differences between a professional athlete and someone who's not. And it's that they do understand this to some extent. Maybe they cannot express it in a sentence or in a conversation like today. But one thing that I'm noticing a lot, for example, with athletics is becoming more trendy, let's say, in a sense.
Okay.
And there's this guy who's the fastest, the Olympic champion in the 100 meters, Noah Lyles, and he gets challenged a lot by all these influencers or other athletes, like they could beat him very easily because, of course, everyone's better than him. in their talking, of course.
Mm.
And when you see the actual numbers, you see they're so delusional in that sense because there's no chance they can really
Yeah.
match that skill, that kind of skill. And and especially the influencers that are doing this are so disconnected from doing it for passion, the passion of just doing the thing and enjoying it. It's all about the result. I want to be the best in the world so I can have the fame and recognition, right? And
Mm.
it's usually a bad motivation to do anything if you think about it, because it's gonna strip the joy out of what you do. If you ride, probably you love to be with your horse and you enjoy that time. And the more you focus on doing the right things in that moment to get better, to like you want to be curious. How do I get better with this? How do I because I think humans have this curiosity when we're young. It kind of gets stripped away with school and growing up and
Yeah.
work and all that. But if you connect to that inner child again, that inner child will not ride like you, would not run like me,
Yeah.
or maybe now it would for me. But like if you can connect to that and just have fun, you'll see kids do the right things. Most of the times they're good runners. And
Yeah.
if you put them on a horse long enough, they're going to be good pretty quickly because they don't care about the goal usually, unless their parents put that kind
Mm.
of mindset on them. But usually they just have fun doing something and it works. It works pretty well until we forget about it and we start to become goal oriented.
Yeah. And that's a nice takeaway. Be like you were when you were a child
Yeah.
and have that mindset of just doing it for the pure hell of doing it, nothing else, the pure enjoyment and like you say, the curiosity and what happens if and that kind of thing. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Now you also you have a little checklist that
Yeah.
people can log on to and check in with their own paradox and their where they're up
Yeah.
to as well. So how do they access that and how do we contact you on socials and all that good stuff?
Yeah, the access to the list checklist, and there's also some prompts for a journal if people want to take the time to do that, just 1 minute a day, and then grow if you want.
Yeah.
You can do that from a link. There's no email capture, there's no data capture, so it's just free gift for your audience,
Oh,
of course. And then to contact me, you can look me up on LinkedIn, for example, Marcello Costante. Yeah, probably that's the best way, or even Facebook if you prefer. Both work. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
fabulous. Oh, you have been an inspiration. I
Thank
love
you.
I love the take that you have on goals and results and that is so nice that we can just enjoy a little bit more, but we get these sneaky little backdoor goal back well
Yeah.
at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. Really, like I said before, hopefully this conversation helps someone, and hopefully the checklist and the journal prompts. If someone, like, if you try it, you'll see it for yourself. If you try it long enough, 3 months, probably you start to have a glimpse on this. It doesn't take that long. Actually, for some people, it might be almost instantaneous because when you shift that focus, you realize how much you like to do what you do, and you let go of that pressure and that stress, and eventually you'll see that you get more opportunities. For my business, it was the case. Like, 1 week. In 1 week, I started to see these opportunities that were chasing me, and I was just running away from them, basically.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. Brilliant. Well, I hope you'll come back onto the podcast because it has been
Absolutely.
fascinating. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.